What is education, and why is education important? Is it important? After all, what's the real purpose of getting educated about anything? We so frequently take education and the process for learning in general totally for granted. Not only that, but the ways in which we think. How we've gone about structuring our own consciousness itself has largely remained unchanged for a long, long time. So how do we literally change our minds? Can we reconfigure our own ways of thinking? And if so, how? Join Dr. Joseph Atman, the founder of one of the world's most revolutionary educational centers, Middletree, and award-winning broadcaster Tammy Trujillo for Educate Everyone, and explore the mysteries of our own consciousness and the education we implement in order for it to be what it is.
Our guest on this episode of Educate Everyone is Dr. Pedro Noguera. He's the Emory Stoops and Joyce King Stoops Dean of the USC Rossier School of Education and a distinguished professor of education. A leading sociologist, he studies how social and economic conditions shape schools and student outcomes. Now here's Dr. Atman with Dr. Noguera.
Thanks, Dr. Noguera, for being here with us. Can you just tell us a little bit about you and your background and how that all kind of ties into the conversation that we have around education all the time here on Educate Everyone in general?
Sure. So great to be with you. I'm currently the dean of the School of Education at USC. I've been in academia for most of my career at different universities around the country, but I've also been very involved with schools. In fact, just today I published an article about New York City and what the new mayor should do to address education. And so although I'm in higher ed, I stay very focused on education in all settings, and particularly public schools. I continue to think it's the most important resource we have for addressing many of the problems we face as a country.
Why do you think that?
Well, when you invest in education, you're investing in kids. To repeat a euphemism, are the future. They are our future voters, our future parents, our future leaders. And so by educating kids and by giving them the opportunities and the tools they need to navigate the world, solve problems, you're investing in making the future better.
Without a doubt, that's by and large why so many people, of course, get into education. I think that's why so many people want to be educated in the first place, right? Is to improve themselves, to improve what's happening, within not only the world, but their immediate world. And so you wrote this article about what Mayor-elect Mondani should do. What should he be doing?
Well, I'm intrigued by his vision of making the city more affordable, making it a place where the people who live and do all the work in the city can afford to live. He's going to have to take on education because, there are 900,000 kids in the schools. That's the largest school system in the United States. But a tenth of those kids, over 100,000, are homeless, chronically housing insecure, which means that you can't just focus on the academics. You've also got to focus on making sure those kids have mentors, making sure they have after-school programs and that they're fed, because you got to think holistically about the needs of kids. So it's a big challenge. And so that's the reason why I was moved to offer some ideas of things he could do to ensure that he is moving the system forward and serving all of the students who enter that system.
That seems like an obviously noble and reasonable thing to do. Why hasn't that happened? And not just in New York public school systems. I know that the population we work with in and around, some of the greater areas of Southern California, most particularly and especially Los Angeles. And you're at USC, so you're very familiar with that issue right outside of your doorstep, both of our doorsteps, where homelessness issue of so many students just not being able to have a stable place to be, much less be able to focus on getting a good quality education. So it seems like an obvious thing to try and shore up. And yet, does that really fall at the feet of the school systems to ensure? What can politicians do to make this a better, more tenable situation for students?
Well, it's ironic, we're speaking today and the Trump administration announced that they're going to take the Title I program. This is the program that was created because of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. They're going to take it, and it serves poor kids, millions of children across America, provides them with free breakfast, free lunch, academic services to compensate for the effects of poverty. And they're going to stick it in the Labor Department. They didn't explain why. They didn't explain if this is going to improve. Nothing. And it's really sad because most other wealthy nations don't expect schools to solve problems like poverty. If we lived in Canada, there's a whole social system out there to support kids and families in need. We don't live in a country like that. And that's the reason why schools are saddled with the responsibility of addressing so many other issues that go beyond education. And right now, Trump administration is going to make that work even that much more difficult. So I think it's important for people who are listening to keep in mind, education is a nonpartisan issue. It should not matter if you're Republican or Democrat. Your responsibility is to make sure that all kids are educated, regardless of their backgrounds. And this administration is basically abandoning that responsibility.
You said that they moved it under labor without really an explanation. So how can you jump to the conclusion that they're abandoning that responsibility? And also, if we're not doing a great job of that in the school systems right now, how can we say that it's not going to improve with some sort of change? Aren't you suggesting that we need to change something because it's not being done effectively at this point?
Yeah, if they had a plan, they would hold hearings. They would explain. They would even put out a press release. This is what we're doing. This is why. This is what you can expect. That's what typical governments do, Republican and Democrat. This administration's done none of that. They've just said, we're moving it. And just a few weeks ago, they eliminated all the positions that are responsible for special education. They didn't say what we're going to do to ensure that children who have learning disabilities are well served. They just said we're going to eliminate it. So what I see is them washing their hands rather than putting forward a plan and a vision for how to do the work. As I was trying to say before, it should not be the case that schools are responsible for addressing the needs of kids who are homeless or kids who don't have enough food to eat. That should be the society does that work. That's what happens in most other countries, Western Europe, Australia. Rich countries do this. The United States is one of the few that ignores that responsibility. And so consequently, what we see in this country is lots of people don't get the education they need to support themselves and their family. They just announced last week, 500,000 adults in California between the ages of 16 and 24 are neither working nor in school. So think about that. And the majority of them are males. Majority of males. We have a huge problem on our hands because if you're not working or employed at that critical age, you're going to end up a burden on somebody else, your family, or if they don't have the resources, you'll be out on the streets. It's not a wise way to go about supporting your people.
So what do other countries, other societies do to support this exact issue that we don't do in the United States? And what is it that has worked so far in whatever implements we have up to this point put into place that we can build on?
Well, if we just took a look at Canada, right? They're our neighbor to the north. They speak English and French, but most of them speak English as we do. I like to point out to people, you know that Canada has no ghettos? If you go to major cities like Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver, you don't see ghettos. They have social problems. They have people with drug problems, et cetera. I don't want to try to romanticize, but you don't see ghettos like you see in every city, large or small, throughout the United States. Right now, if you were to go to Detroit, which was once one of America's great cities, home to the auto industry, now a dying city, it's right across the river from Windsor, Ontario. Windsor, which has a large black population, no ghettos, stable, middle-class community. How come Canada is able to support their population in ways we can't? Well, they invest in children early. The society, if there's a low-income family, the Canadian government makes sure that the family gets a $6,000 check each year for their children, for childcare, for food, health care. It's not up to the family to figure it out, and certainly it isn't up to the schools. So all we have to do is look abroad, and we will see there are better ways to do this than we do in this country.
That sounds great. So why, again, circling back to my original question, why don't we do that? And again, what is it that we're currently doing that is working? Because certainly, as we saw during COVID, and to your point, when those meals stopped coming for students, that was initially a big issue for a lot of families because a lot of families just counted on SNAP benefits and things kicking in at schools. That's where a lot of kids literally got fed, and not to mention taken care of just generally throughout the day. So there are some things that we obviously do within the current system that seemed to at least provide some support for a lot of families and a lot of people. So if you were Mayor Mondani, if you were the president of either the United States or some other place that needed this kind of support, and what we see is, a lack thereof currently, or as you've described it, what are the steps that you would take to better enact your ideas and your plan?
Well, the president's not a king, so we'd have to work with Congress and with governors and local leaders to ensure that we are providing the supports to schools so that it's not left to teachers to go into their own pockets, which happens so often, to buy paper and pens and make sure the kids have backpacks or meals. You should not leave it to schools to figure these things out. The society, we live in a rich nation with plenty of wealthy people. Los Angeles, where I live, we have large numbers of very wealthy people, and we also have very poor people in the same city. And so right now we have created a condition where schools are expected to solve social problems they did not create. And then they're blamed for why they struggle in teaching reading and math, etc. Now, I would prefer to, let's say, schools just focus on the academics. Society will take care of those other needs. We'll make sure that kids are fed because hungry kids don't do so well in school. And what we know is that when those needs are met, kids of all kinds can be successful. Because I can name schools in various parts of the country where kids who are homeless, where kids who have learning disabilities, kids who don't speak English as a first language, do very well when you meet their needs. And that shows you the problem is not the children or their families. The problem is neglect. Lyndon B. Johnson, the president in 1964, who through the Civil Rights Act created Title I. This is the program I spoke about a while ago that supplements funding to schools that have kids in poverty. He himself was once a teacher. He taught in Texas on the border, and he saw firsthand what happens when you ignore and neglect the needs of kids. And hence he was an advocate. The fact that he was a white Southerner did not prevent him from feeling a sense of empathy and compassion for those children. So we have many examples in this country that show us we can do this. What we lack is the will to make it happen.
But again, aren't we currently doing that in a lot of ways with the current programs that we have? So once again, what do we need to expand on? And when you're talking about society needs to fix the problem, what does that look like? Is that just monetary support? Is that more programs? You talked about mentorship. That's something that we're really big on, obviously. But mentorship, doesn't necessarily feed people. Mentorship goes so far. Can't shelter and feed folks. So when you say society needs to fix it, it can't be necessarily just handed off to the schools. And I totally agree with that in part. But again, what does that mean when we say, well, society needs to fix it?
Well, it means that we need to, for example, ensure that mothers have adequate nutrition for their babies, because we know that low birth weight babies will have developmental problems. It means that we have to have more affordable housing so people have a stable place to live. These are basic things. I'm not saying that we need to everybody live in a mansion. I'm saying basic needs should be met. I was in Portugal this past June. Portugal is not the richest country. Portugal is far poorer than the United States. But in Portugal, everything I've just described is in place. How come the Portuguese can afford to take care of their children, but the United States can't? It's absurd.
I assume Portugal, has a much smaller population. And so is that part of the issue? I'm looking for the systemic causes. We're talking about the issues. What's the systemic causes? There's a reason why things are the way they are.
Sure.
And what is that reason?
Well, there are many reasons. I would say that part of it comes from, there's an American belief that people who are poor because they're lazy and they're undeserving, rather than they haven't had opportunities. If you shift it and focus on the opportunity and make sure that particularly children get opportunities early on in life, then you start to see patterns change. You don't see intergenerational poverty as you do in this country. You see kids who are able to use education to help themselves and help their families. That's the American dream. This is the reason why the United States is one of the first countries to create public schools. We believed that schools could be the equalizer of opportunity. And for sometimes it works that way. My family was low income. We grew up in New York City. During my early years, we lived in the projects. My father was a police officer, but we had 6 kids, and neither of them had college degrees. But they sent all 6 of us to colleges: Harvard, Brown, Cornell, Berkeley. Living proof that your background should not determine what you can accomplish in education. Problem is that in this country, a child's background more often than not will determine what can happen to them later on in life. And we should all be disturbed that that's the case in this country.
So you talk about opportunity. Given your background, what's the differentiation between your experience and the people who can't get ahead? I think you hit on something with opportunity there, right? We need to create as much opportunity for people as possible. So what's the difference between what you had to go through versus all these folks you're advocating and fighting for and the challenges that they're up against? And if it comes down to opportunity, what opportunities aren't there currently that you were at least afforded and able to take advantage of for yourself and your siblings to have these wonderful educational experiences?
Well, I would say I was lucky because I had 2 parents and a stable home. And my parents really believed in education, so they pushed us to read, for example, go to libraries, get books. Even though they didn't have the ability to help us with homework, especially once we entered the upper grades, middle school, they still laid the foundation in terms of love of education and developing our character. But let's face it, there are lots of kids that don't have those things, don't have a stable home, don't have parents who have the time or the ability to get involved. And that's where other institutions have to step up, schools, to support children. The thing is, they can't do it by themselves. You mentioned mentoring a while ago. I'm a big supporter of mentoring because every child needs to have an adult who shows interest in them and is helping to develop their talents and providing guidance. However, as you pointed out, mentors by themselves can't solve the big array of problems facing children in poverty. So we need more than that. This is what I mentioned in the article about Mayor Mondami. New York City has the best example in the nation of what you can do if you provide support to kids from birth through college. And it's called the Harlem Children's Zone. It serves 12,000 kids in central Harlem. It's been doing it now for over 20 years. It's highly successful. And it's successful because everything from dental work to music lessons, those kids are getting the support they need, the opportunities they need to escape poverty. The same kind of opportunities that middle class and affluent kids get and take for granted. What the Harlem Children's Zone shows is that it works. And what we need to do is to make sure those kinds of opportunities are available to kids all over the country.
So what does that program do specifically, and how can that be implemented on a wider scale?
Well, as I said, they start from birth. When a mom has a child, they start right away making sure they get adequate nutrition. They enroll those kids in preschool and quality daycare, so they're learning early, because the early learning sets the foundation for later learning. And then they're in excellent schools, kindergarten through 12th grade, where they not only have strong academics, but they also have strong teachers. They have after-school programs, music programs, sports, all the things that we know are important for a well-rounded education. And then this doesn't stop at high school. When those kids go to college, they continue to provide summer jobs and other kinds of guidance, because we know lots of people start college and end up dropping out because they either have to work or they don't have the guidance they need. So it's a holistic, wraparound approach that the Children's Zone provides, and the evidence shows it's very successful.
And do you know who funds that program? I think we're all in agreement that, yes, all of these things are necessary, and we all want to see that happen for everyone. However, if it was that easy to do, I think it would be done. At least I would hope it would be done. So how can programs that have this sort of success be implemented on larger and larger scales? And again, why are they not, if it's as easy as following a blueprint that's already been laid out by programs like the one you just described, or a number of others? I mean, what we do at Middle Tree, I think, has by and large been extraordinarily successful in its own right. And so many of the other people that I've encountered and talked to on this show and just in our daily work are doing such good work. They've got such good models. There's so many strong ideas out there, and yet education isn't what it could and should be. And yet, as we have talked about largely here today, a lot of that really comes from something on more of a societal level. Again, I think we're hitting on something interesting, given that we're talking about opportunity. And I think maybe a large part of that, or the difficulties that we encounter, are because of what's at least perceived of by a lot of people as a lack of opportunity or a lack of knowledge about how to access some of the opportunity that might be afforded to them. There's got to be some sort of balance between presenting opportunity, but then there has to be some work from the individuals themselves as well to get motivated. And all the opportunity in the world can be there. If people don't take advantage of it, then there may as well be no opportunity there. So,
I would say we tolerate as a nation a high degree of suffering, a high degree of waste of human beings. We spend thousands and thousands of dollars a year just to incarcerate a person, far more than we spend to educate a child. But we will warehouse people in prisons, the majority of whom might not have ended up in prison had we done a better job educating them earlier on. So we're investing in the wrong things. Look at the debate over healthcare right now. We can't figure out that all people need to be able to have access to health. We need a preventative strategy for health. You know why so many Americans right now are moving to Europe, like Portugal, where I was, where so many Americans are moving there? Because they want their healthcare system and they're allowed to buy into it. How come Portugal, a relatively poor European country, is able to do that, but we can't? It's really a reflection of our values as a nation and what we're willing to tolerate. I know we're focused on education. As I said at the beginning, I have been in this field for a long time, and I continue to see it as the best avenue we have for creating a more just and fair society. But part of that means that we've got to advocate for those who don't have the ability to do so for themselves and whose rights are not being acknowledged. And until we see it that it's in our national interest to educate all kids, it's not going to happen.
We'll have more of our conversation with Dr. Pedro Noguera on our next episode of Educate Everyone. And now the Middle Tree Minute.
This is Kristen Hernandez, Middle Tree's executive assistant. When a task feels hard, help your student think about their future self. Say things like, your future self will be glad you started this now. Or, what could we do today to help your future self feel proud tomorrow? This simple shift teaches planning, responsibility, and emotional regulation. It helps them zoom out for a moment, from frustration in the moment to empowerment over time. And it reminds them that they are growing into someone strong, capable, and thoughtful. And that's the Middle Tree Minute.
And now a quick look into Dr. Atman's book, A Philosophical War. Joe, last time we talked, we were discussing how human beings react to the events that we encounter in our daily lives and why we react, both in good and bad ways. So question now is, what would be a different approach to the ways we interact with the events that occur around us that might be better or different?
Better or different, good or bad, those are all kind of relative terms, probably. But when you look around, within this human world we've created, there's a lot of despair, there's a lot of dread, a lot of anxiety, a lot of things that, and again, we've talked about this many times, a lot of things that make us feel disconnected from the world. So our project here within A Philosophical War, within my work in general, is how do we reconnect to that missing, frequently ineffable piece, this mysterious piece that we feel is, again, kind of a void within us. A lot of people turn to various things. The common ones are, addictions or bad relationships or whatever. But the not so much talked about things are just the ways by which we don't focus on the really important things to us. And we fill that lack of focus with any number of things. And this could be even things that we enjoy, even things that we aspire to. Doing that sometimes doesn't leave people as fulfilled as they might think that they otherwise would be. And I think the argument for that is, again, that there's this underlying, unspoken disconnect. There's this big mystery. Life for human beings is a big mystery. And that's because of the way that we have structured our consciousness. We talked about this ad nauseum. The whole book is really taking a philosophical look at the ways in which we've gone about up to this point in our human history, structuring the way that we've become human. And so there's kind of it's a sort of cliche. It's a simple notion is, well, you change your minds, You'll change the way you look at things. But not only that, you'll alter the person and the general being of who and what you are if you're able to do that. And a lot of people have new perspectives on things, but we're frequently focused on the event itself. We're frequently focused on the external, on what encounters us, what happens within our daily life, and we're not nearly as focused on the ways in which we think. It's like we eat the food, but we're not concerned about the digestion. We're shoving phenomena into our proverbial mouth. We're shoving all these experiences into our own beings without concern of how these things are going to, again, be digested within us. How the actual system that looks at all of these things is able to make sense of the things that happen to us. So what we're trying to look at here, and again, is what that digestive system actually is. And for us in this manner, what we're talking about here, it's how, again, we are conscious beings. And my contention is that we need to maybe look at what I've kind of called is the sort of mysterious originality that human being actually is. My suspicion is that, like all things, consciousness has kind of come to this place. You might use the word evolved. I'm not sure, for a number of different reasons. That's something that I don't want to put necessarily that term of evolution into people's minds in talking about this particular happening within consciousness for a number of different reasons that I'll get into later. But more so that we've had a number of experiences within our humanness that has informed our consciousness to act in the way that we currently enjoy it or don't enjoy it frequently. So what might the original consciousness of a human being have looked like? Because at some point in our history, that has, and I'll use it here, that has evolved. That has transpired. It has changed, likely, from what it was originally. We can all imagine that might have been the case. So the question that I'm posing, and that I frequently go back, is, have we lost some kind of originality? Something that other kinds of beings who don't feel this disconnection to the world, that don't struggle with meaning, don't struggle with the ways that we deal with dread and despair and anxiety and sadness and all these things that, again, we said good or bad at the beginning of this. I don't want to couch something good or bad because everything can be used as a tool for a certain kind of experience, for a lesson. And yet we've taken so many of experiences that we have and just focused on the dread, on the anxiety or the sadness or what have you. And we refuse to learn lessons. So again, what might the original human consciousness have looked like? Is there a way that we can in some way hearken back to a kind of originality? Is that even something we should be attempting to do? I think my point in that kind of thought experiment is to get us thinking about what would my own consciousness look like if all of my memories, all of the events that I've assigned definitions to were not wiped away, like you have no memory per se, but what if you were able to have memories but yet not assign certain ideas to them? What if you just had an original conscious experience with events without saying this is good, this is bad, this is whatever the label might be, whatever the bias might be, whatever, again, your notion or idea of the situation actually in fact was? What if you were able to just encounter without ascribing a definition to that encounter? So that's kind of the thought experiment, and that's where we will start to dig in deeper from here.
Thank you for listening to Educate Everyone with Dr. Joseph Atman and Tammy Trujillo. Join us each week as we explore the inner workings of our own minds and the educational system which builds and supports it. Also, check out our website at middletree.org to see what opportunities Middletree's programs can offer you or your student. And join us on social media. If you have any questions you'd like Dr. Atman to answer, please leave them on a post or send us a message, and you may hear them answered on the next episode of Educate Everyone. Until then, thanks for tuning in.